record to this computer. Awesome. All right, welcome to Physiology. My name is Keenan, and I'll be leading this course. I am originally from Colorado, and as you can tell, Colorado was really pretty. I ended up coming to Minnesota, went to Carleton, make all the nerd Frisbee jokes that you want. They're probably all true. I ended up in Omaha, Nebraska at University of Nebraska Medical Center, where I did, where I started what I do, which is cancer research. Did a lot of that still at Mayo Clinic and still do, and ended up doing a visiting year at Gustavus, and now I'm here. And we're very, very excited. And, despite the circumstances, I think that we're going to do very well. So I'm a geneticist by trade. One of my favorite focuses is looking how malleable genetics actually are. You can actually change genetics a lot more than what we envision right now of changing genetics is mainly like, oh, we have to go CRISPR something. No. All the genes that it takes to take a wolf from this really cool picture and turn it into this, all those genes were there. So my focus as a geneticist is actually not so much the passing down, but what dosage and what timing genes turn on and off in a lot of cases. So as you can tell, this isn't a real picture but that would be awesome. This is my Pomeranian Scout. We got her when she was 5. She's wonderful. She shows up in a lot of my pictures, stuff like that. So if you're a dog person, we have that in common already. So it's good. So what I do is I look at the genetics of tumors, and I basically assign and try to predict the future based on those genetics and the physiology of the subsequent cell based on those genetics. Because remember, genetics are basically the blueprint for what's actually going to happen here. And they're behind the scenes in a lot of stuff that we're going to be studying. But essentially, that's what I do for research, is I make sure that what therapy we give patients, which we are well past just one round of chemo and that's it. We have hundreds, thousands of different therapies that we can assign. My job is to figure out which one is best. I did a lot of this at Mayo Clinic, for example, and I'm going to actually zoom out a little bit. There we go. Some of what I do at Mayo Clinic had to deal with a new regimen called R2-CHOP, where we actually added in a new therapy. And as you can tell, people with 3 of these main mutations that we get in lymphomas in the red for R-CHOP, those actually do really poorly, as you can tell in that survival curve. But when you add the R2-CHOP regimen, which is something that Mayo is kind of trying to perfect, those patients up top in red do great. And that's kind of this point of the survival curve. So this is very much the beginning of a new idea in medicine, which is going to be that we want to treat patients before the symptoms, before they fail, before they end up, for example, in this curve right here, instead put them over here, right? Okay, so I will link in the chat. I think I've linked in the chat the forms thing. So that's just like a little survey. This is gonna help me know what you're after in this class, and like kind of also what you're after just in general, because that's, we're much more than just this class right now. I really want to know what interests you, what's outside of class, because then I can get to know everybody a little better, and we can have a really good time in lab with everybody, and we can kind of customize the direction that I'm going to take things every week, because hopefully we can kind of pursue directions in each lab that are more in line with what everybody's interests are. So you can pause right here if you want and fill that out, and then we can go on. So the key with, and why I think lab is so important, is that this is your time for hands-on experience. And unfortunately, yes, right now, some of that's not going to be super hands-on, but this is still a very good chance to practice skills that need development. One of those, and I'm not joking about this, and this isn't just like finding positivity, it is telehealth. Rural areas in this country suffer from a massive lack of basically medical attention and help. One of my best friends from UNC did his master's in emergency preparedness in rural areas like this. He ended up in Colorado in the mountains, a place called Granby, which is way far away from any major hospital. So the ability to work through this system, for example, and then also maybe even someday, learn from experts that are halfway across the country without having to get on a plane, disturb their work stick, things like that. That is something that you can do. Importantly too, nobody can pull off a healthcare an operation without teamwork. And that's kind of the point of the random lab groups. In a perfect world, obviously, I probably would have just let everybody just choose and show up. but we needed to assign that Zoom schedule. So thus, we're here. So these are kind of the golden outcome. I'm not just going to read off the slide for you. You can read that on your own. My goals are just, that this is a good time. This is a good experience. Lab is meant to, I think, supplement what, what you're learning in lecture. But I feel as though it's also a great time to go into the very different examples. And we'll go into a couple today, for example, and then we'll set you loose and you can go collect your data. So in this case, hopefully you'll get to see some of the cool, methodologies behind and science behind physiology, as well as also kind of honing those healthcare skills that you'll use in the future. Okay, so this is what I can promise you. I'm going to try and be incredibly available. And as far as what the office hour situation is on Zoom, use the appointlet to make that. And if you really do want to meet in person, I think that we could probably arrange to meet in a common area or something. But if Zoom works, then Zoom works, and that's great. For me, this is I have tons of time this first semester because I'm only teaching labs. So in that case, definitely feel free to come to me for any, if you want to talk about careers. I did my PhD in a medical center. I went to Mayo, for example. I have a ton of friends who are in allied health, medicine, nursing. All of them can offer insights and that network that I've built to you. And I want to be able to offer that too. So if you ever want advice, anything like that, I'm totally open to going over that. Or, if you just need someone to talk to, this is your first time in, some of the health science classes, I'm always here too. Okay. Hooray, this is just a bonus slide. Yeah, it's kind of, importance of positivity. Easy for me to say, I know. Easier for some people to say than others. But I do try in these kind of stranger times to reflect on what's going well and build on that. I'd ask you to do your best in that scenario. I obviously understand that I can't just make everybody be positive, but I'm positive when I see the dog at home, for example. So that's a good. And this is just another excuse to show pictures of her. So the lab structures that I want to do for my 3 sections, I do really want to open things up in the beginning. Maybe do some practice questions, things like that. Maybe go over some really cool concepts. That's something that I'd be very excited about. Other than that, it's pretty cut and dry, like what we saw in the syllabus. It's the 2-for-1 Zoom and then in-person ratio. And in this case, really do just rely on each other. And what I mean by that is, exchange contact info, make sure that you're all on the same page, and trade Zooms if you're having symptoms. And I'm not going to say this in an email, but trade Zooms if you, and it's college, and I totally get it. If you encounter a scenario where you were in an environment that was a high likely transmission event of some kind, so maybe lots of people inside, who knows, maybe use one of your Zoom weeks that week after. Don't bring that in. If you can help it, I'm not going to judge you, you're fine. Technically we can actually have groups. Technically we only need one person in here live. So don't feel bad if you can't make it, but you can only make it over Zoom because of those circumstances, okay? All right, so homeostasis. This is what we're after. This is what we're going to cover today. Basically, homeostasis is your body defending itself against the environment. And in our case, we're endotherms. We need to maintain that temperature perfectly. We run at about 37 degrees Celsius, and a lot of our systems are meant to make sure that that stays, okay? So just like the slide kind of outlines, it's us, it's our body versus the environment. We have systems that automatically fight the environment for us. When it's cold, when it's hot, we have stuff that regulates that. And we're going to see that with our heartbeat, we don't want that to go, all over the place, right? We want the heartbeat to go like this. We want a very small range, and that's what we're going to see in a sec. So I would always advise you to kind of read through some of that intro stuff, take some initial notes before we come in. I'll usually try and post a fun, an informative or a fun video on D2L that we can go over, and I'll try and go over some of the key concepts. We may not always go over the strict, what do the words mean? I don't want to just rehash that in a presentation when I know that you guys can read it, and that's going to be okay. But I wanted to highlight some of the differences between negative and feed forward. So in negative feedback, you're going to want something, like I said, you don't want stuff, you want stuff to stay closer to the average. You don't want things to go off the kilter, for example, right? You want things to stay normal. This is the case with temperature, respiration, heartbeats. And importantly, it's also going to start becoming the case more in a more endocrine type system with your glucose regulation. You don't want too much glucose in your blood. It's basically poison. You don't want too low. It means you're starving. Your brain's going to starve in that case. So looking at feed-forward processes, though, this is anticipating the future, and this is going to change your physiology a little bit. So as we can tell, if something is coming after you, your body will get a dose of adrenaline that will set off a physiological feed-forward reaction. And what it'll do, it'll scare you, it'll make your heart start beating, it'll actually cancel your engaging systems like your intestines and things like that. Because if you're running, you don't need to digest anything. That can wait. You got to get away right now. So other good examples are, before an athletic event, your body starts going into that anticipation mode. We've all kind of felt that even, and this probably, the pre-exercise thing, that sensation probably happens just even before a performance or things like that. It doesn't have to be in athletics. The other cool thing is that your immune response is very good at reacting to things and changing its response and initiating something heavy duty. For example, like a fever. A fever is a deviation. It's an increase of your internal temperature. You do want that in the case of something coming in. So this is an example of that. If you have some sort of stimulus, as we have right here, and this could be the pathogen showing up, it's going to cause certain producing cells to secrete what we call cytokines. All these are little molecules that go and excite and explode your immune system, and it's ready to go. Okay? This target cell could be one of your main immune cells, one of the really heavy duty ones. They're going to have an effect. They're going to hunt down that pathogen most likely, or maybe in this case, they'll start a fever. That's a feed forward thing. It's going to keep going. So I should warn everybody, give me a show of hands here, or like kind of, thumbs up, thumbs down if talking about COVID is something that's okay in this class. It is human physiology. I wanted to use a good example here. But I also understand this disease has touched a lot of people, and I don't want to, rehash something that's been painful. So just kind of let me know, like, if you're in person right now, kind of give me like a thumbs up, thumbs down right here, and I'll kind of read the room. So if you can skip this if you want to skip this part, but essentially what an overreaction of a feed-forward system can do. So something like, your cytokines that excites your immune system, sometimes that feed-forward reaction of a little bit of cytokine comes out, that causes 8 more cells to spit out cytokine. Those 8 cells cause 64 cells to spit out cytokine, and those 64 cells cause thousands of cells to spit out cytokines. And now all the cytokines are doing is revving up your body and causing fevers, causing all kinds of stuff. This is one of the ways that COVID damages the body, is that it revs your immune system up and it gets going too fast. It's basically like an avalanche rolling down a hill. You can't stop it. So there are certain weaknesses in our immune system. It's a very powerful thing. It's something that I study. And what I can tell you about what I study is, the immune system, it's a nuke. It's huge. It can do almost anything. Sometimes it can do too much, as you can tell. Okay. So today we are going to be measuring heart rate, and this is a negative feedback loop. So as we see here, your heart rate's kind of like climbing in between a certain spot. It wants to maintain the average. If it was going like this, something is probably wrong, right? You don't want that. Oh, let's get rid of these. So in that case, what you're looking for in a patient typically is a nice even heart rate. If you have stuff bouncing around, it's a little different. So this is the set point right here. Oh, I think I can actually highlight, give me that. This is the set point. It's essentially the average. And that's where patients are going to be different. Some people have higher heartbeats than others. One of my students at Gustavus, we did this exercise. Their resting heartbeat was like 95. I was like, do you maybe want to go to the clinic or something? I was a little worried, to be honest. So there's 2 other sets of values that we can look at. The above set point. These are all, so after you take the set point and you find that mean, that average, you can look at all the individual measured values that were above that. Take that average of those. Those are the above set points. Okay. Then take the below set points. These are the average of everything, every measurement that was actually below your calculated standard mean. So take all those and average those out as well. Or this would be a PowerPoint and I would animate, but PDFs are just a lot nicer. So what this does, I'm going to highlight this in good coloring. This is how you calculate range in this case. And this is what we're going to be doing today, is you're going to take those values that you have there in each case. You're going to find your average. Then you're going to define your above set point values and your below set point values. And you're going to set them against each other. You're going to find that range, basically. Where does this patient's heartbeat exist? So in this case, I asked this question a little bit. Would you consider a large range healthy? And that would, yeah, you know, that's going to be looking, instead of like this, it's going to be like, oh my goodness. I would not characterize that as a healthy patient. I would actually characterize that as, yeah, unhealthy. Let's just go with that. One thing that this lab can actually really prepare you for as far as direct medical situations is that a lot of emergency room stuff, so any of you that will participate in medicine, you're going to encounter the emergency room rotation. You may even stay there. A lot of emergency rooms detail overdoses. And overdoses can come in many different forms. They can come in the form of stimulants, that your patient's going to have a really high, really sporadic heart rate, or depressants. They've OD'd on something that is going to cause a sporadic but low heart rate. So always something to look out for. You know, I think we're going to skip this stuff. This is actually, all right, we'll cover this later. This is the advantages of being an endotherm. I'm basically going to tell you how the dinosaurs died and how mammals like us rose up out of that and we're alive. That's a story for another day. So we'll go from there. Another cool, yeah, so we'll do that later. All right, last thing. Remember that I'm here to help. You know, I want everybody to get A's in this lab. I'm not kidding about that, okay? So use my time, you know, come, you know, flag me down, work with each other, work with other groups to see how they're doing, collaborate, okay? And just know that this is totally a good, like, safe place for you to learn and have a hands-on experience with physiology. So as you can tell, Scout here, you know, everybody needs help sometimes, okay? This is super confusing sometimes, right? So always flag me down. I'm always available to help. I'm always happy to help. That's why, you know, I love teaching. That's why I'm here. So, all right, let's get started.